The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of On the Fly, brought to you by hoopball.com. We're providing in-flight insight for all Peli-Fans out there. I'm your host, Nick Garisco, and I'm here, as always, with Pelicans expert Michael Pelichet. You can find him on Twitter at Mike_Pelicans. I'm at Fantasy Law Guy. Pelichet, last time we spoke, we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. We had just taken the defending champs to overtime on the road without our best player, and we were feeling pretty optimistic. Since our last episode, however, the Pelicans have had 3 games, and we lost our home opener to the Mavericks, 116 to 123. We lost at Houston, 126 to 123. I think I said that score twice. I meant the Mavericks game was 116 to 123. Lost to Houston, 126 to 123. And at that point, we're thinking, hey, slow start, but we got some rotation issues. We're competing with some of these good teams, and we're playing hard, but we're just not closing, which is to be expected by a young team. But then last night, we get pantsed by the struggling Warriors team at home in a game where I think the final score, I think we ended up losing by 9 or something. The final score didn't really reveal the blowout nature of the game. So after 1 week of the NBA season, the Pels are in a hole at 0-4. Michael, is it time to panic?
It's not time to panic, but I think calling it getting pantsed was a really good analogy. Last game was rough. I actually think there are a lot of positive takeaways from the first three games, but last game was really, really rough.
Yeah, the Warriors were just coming off and I don't know if this made them play harder. They got embarrassed by OKC, I think a night or two prior to that game. And I think I'd have to check the stats here, the numbers here, but I believe at some point when I was scrolling through my fantasy scores here, and I have a couple of OKC players. I got Paul and Gilgeous-Alexander, who's been great this year, by the way. But I was looking at his game, and I saw on his box score that the Oklahoma City Thunder were up on the Warriors like 110 to, I think it was 73 or something like that in the third quarter. And I was like, whoa, that cannot be right. I thought ESPN was like making a mistake, so I went and looked at the Score Center app, and sure enough, I mean, the Warriors got dominated by the Oklahoma City Thunder, and there was some talk the next day about how they were kind of, they haven't been the same, obviously. I know that, Draymond's been dealing with injuries. I know that they have to, have life without Clay and KD, but this is a Warriors team that isn't near as good as the Warriors have been in the last couple of years. And I don't know if this embarrassment by OKC made them play harder or show up for that Pelicans game to kind of rebound. But, wow, I mean, they really kind of embarrassed us there, right?
Yeah, and there's a really good article that came out today. The guy's last name escapes me. Oh, Ethan Strauss, that's right. So Ethan Strauss wrote this article about Golden State and how one of the things that they're really having trouble with is that their offense was designed to be for very high IQ players who can make reads within the flow of the offense. And because they lost Durant, they also lost Iguodala. They really don't have the kind of depth that they had before. And not that they were just the most amazing deep team, but they were extremely stacked. Yeah, Livingston as well. They were just stacked with people who could make decisions on the fly, and they also had just an incredible amount of top tier talent and shooting, and so that offense was perfect for them. But now they're sort of adjusting to not having that sort of talent, and it's been they've been pretty bad. So it's not great when a really bad team beats up on you. I hope it was an aberration and not a signal of things to come.
Well, the Pelicans obviously weren't able to take advantage of I'll call it the lack of chemistry so far with the Warriors. What did you think the main issue was in that Golden State game?
If I had to say any, I mean, this is going to be an overarching concept, but our defense is just not good at all. Right now we're ranked 29th, and it showed in a lot of ways last night. I actually thought the energy wasn't very good. I hate defaulting to that kind of
No, but
analysis,
that
but
was
I
the
do
first
think they came out
game. You're
flat.
right. That was the first game where the Pelicans just showed up flat. I mean, that happens in
They
sports,
were
right?
Yeah, that does happen. I'm not as concerned right now. If it continues to happen, I'll be concerned because that is one thing we shouldn't be struggling with because we have young
Yeah, and it
legs.
shouldn't happen at
But I would
home
say
either.
that no, and what I didn't like though was really execution beyond it. So it wasn't just that they were dead; it was that they were making really, really foolish decisions. I thought, one of the things that Golden State does really well is they'll get you really high. So basically, where all your defenders are foul line and above. And what happens is that leaves a lot of openings for people to cut to the basket and get open looks. There are a lot of read and react plays, not as many as before, like I said from Strauss's article, but I thought that the Pelicans they got back cut so many times where they were anticipating something happening, and because they had no help, they would go and do something, and man, they got like layup after layup, and it just kind of ugly. I mean, kind of ugly is actually an understatement. It really was one of the worst defensive performances I've seen in a good while for the Pelicans. It not
So
good.
you're mentioning a lot about back cuts and everything like that. That seems schematic, and I'm wondering if you put a lot of the I don't want to call it blame, but reason for the loss on potentially coaching, because I know Alvin Gentry admitted after the game that he got out coached today. I mean, he said the players got outplayed too, but I like the fact that a coach will say, "Hey, we put him in there and admit that he got out coached too." But do you think there's any credence to that?
I would say that if it were coaching, I would say the biggest problem I've had is that they just don't seem like they're getting the defensive system. I mean, that when you're ranked 29th, there's something going wrong. I don't think it's defensive talent. I do think that having only one true rim protector is hurting us right now. We can get to Jackson Hayes playing a little bit more later, but I would say that beyond the personnel, I mean, I do think that there are some real issues with the way that people are adapting to the system. Now whether that is the players just not being, not clever enough, that's not the right word for it, but the players not being seasoned enough to get that kind of system, or if it's the way that it's being implemented, I don't know that. But I can tell you that it's not working right now, and I don't know who to blame for that.
Jackson Hayes did come in, and he actually was quite impressive. It was kind of in garbage time, and I know we've had injuries. Derrick Favors been hurt, and Okafor wasn't exactly playing well by any stretch of the imagination yesterday against Golden State. And so Jackson Hayes came in and actually did pretty well. I mean, it was probably about as good as an opening effort as you're going to get from a rookie. He had 19 points. He was 9 of 11, which is great. 3 boards, 1 steal, 1 block, 1 assist, and he played 24 minutes. Now, we've talked about Jackson Hayes ad nauseum actually before the season started. But the consensus of what we were saying is if we see too much of Jackson Hayes, it's probably bad news for the Pelicans, right? Because it probably means A, something wasn't working, B, we had injuries, or C, we're moving more towards that developmental or player developmental part of the percentage that we talked about as opposed to win now. However, Jackson Hayes really did impress. So what did you make of Jackson Hayes getting the playing time, and what did you make of his game?
I thought he really was what we expected him to be. Jackson Hayes is probably one of the top 5 or 10 guys running to the rim in the NBA. He's just a phenomenal athlete. He's got pretty good dexterity for a guy his size. He's got outrageous leaping ability, and he's got the length in addition to that. So Zion is an explosive leaper, but Zion isn't nearly as long or as tall as Jackson Hayes. And we saw it on one of the alley-oops last night. Was probably a little bit behind where it should have been. I think it was from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But man, like he went up and got it. Draymond actually got a good break on it. He thought he was going to go and grab it, and then Hayes just got up and just destroyed the rim. And that's all like stuff that we expect though. Like that's not new to know that Jackson Hayes can dunk and leap out of the gym. I think that what he does offer us is he does put pressure on the rim, and I mean that in the sense of he's one of the few guys where he's rolling, where he commands just so much respect, and he gives you that vertical spacing. But I'd say like obviously the downside of that is he's sort of lost on defense. So despite being really energetic and really athletic, you lose some things in terms of your overall defense because he's in the wrong spots. And one of the things you just asked me about earlier, Favors being hurt, as much as Favors hasn't been outstanding at all, I would say that he's been less than what I anticipated. Favors is a really good defender, and so is Drew. So we're missing probably our two best defenders. Lonzo might be thrown in there with Favors, but we're missing those two guys, and we have a lot of young people in conjunction. So like that's not a great recipe.
Right. I'm interested to see how much playing time Jackson Hayes gets when a guy like Favors returns. I'm wondering if Jackson Hayes is put in an audition. That's a lot to say there. Put in an audition for more playing time, like ahead of Jahlil Okafor or Melli.
I think, well, I tell you what, man, Melly's defense, I got to be honest, it's been pretty rough. I mean, I have to go back and look at it more before I get too down on it, but he's just slow, and I don't want to make it that simple, but really your ability to react to things is dependent on how quickly you see things, but also how quickly your actual body can move, and the guy is just slow. Like, I want to say it was Harden. I can't remember who he was defending, but I remember he was a help defender on some sort of like pick and roll action, and the guy just went right by him like he was standing still, and that's what it looked like too. Like he's not quick in space, and there's only so much you can do. You can position yourself very well, but as the play develops, there will be times where you might have to just cover ground, and there's no real substitute for quickness in those scenarios. So Melly does offer a lot on offense, and certainly having a pick and pop big is going to be helpful, but the defense is the issue right now. So, you don't have any rim protection with Melly if he's playing the 5, and that could be an issue.
There's a pick and pop big is pretty valuable, of course, because he can shoot, but you don't really see him driving to the basket that much. I mean, he seems kind of one-dimensional, if you ask me. Like, he's got a great shot for a big man, but I'm not really seeing him make the plays or even try to make the plays that somebody like Jackson Hayes would do if he's going to, if he goes to the rim, Jackson Hayes either going to get that alley-oop or get, a pass and then drive there. So it's just, I'm not seeing the versatility there from Melly. I think everybody at this point knows after game 1 that he's probably going to take the outside shot more than move inside with the ball or back anyone down or anything like that.
Yeah, there were a few. He did have 3 or 4 switches where he had a smaller guy on him and he took him into the mid post. But the shots that he was getting were like these turnaround shots. I actually think he made 2 or 3 of them at least. I know he missed at least one. But I'd say that that's not the best offense. Like you want to construct your offense in a way where you're drawing double teams, and a fadeaway shot is not, like, even if he's making those, that's not the kind of high quality offense that you want to be producing.
Right. Yeah, it's not a high percentage shot anytime you're fading away, more than, 15 feet away from the basket. But although Melly is a good shooter, I think that Melly's been pretty much up to expectations that one of us could have expected going into the season. But let's talk about some players who have either exceeded or kind of disappointed us. Us personally, of course, we're personally disappointed. I think one, obviously, and you could be personally disappointed here, is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. We've mentioned Derrick Favors already. It's tough to. I don't want to put too much more time on him. It's tough to evaluate how healthy he really is. I know he had the hamstring going in. I know that now he's having right knee soreness, and I think he's had knee problems in the past. So he's already questionable or a game time decision for the game on Thursday against the Nuggets. So, we're going to exclude Favors from this for now until we kind of get more of a feel for how healthy he has been. But obviously, I think it's fair to say, though, that we expected more from Favors going in, and you did say that earlier. But let's talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because we both saw him in preseason and the summer league, and he looked like a totally different player. And we talked about how much stock we should put into the summer league. You said pretty much nil. We talked about how much stock we should put in preseason, and a little bit if the skills are transferable. But we both had higher expectations on Nah here, and he's just really been, I can't put it any other way than disappointing. I should say raw, to rhyme it with his nickname here of Nah. I think he looks more raw than we expected. What are your thoughts on why he's not kind of panning out the way that the hype kind of portrayed?
I think we definitely, I know me personally, I certainly hyped him up probably more than I should have. I would say that, I did. I just was super excited. I actually think that a lot of the defensive stuff that I saw that made me really excited is still there. I think he's a really, really smart player. I think he's getting it defensively much more quickly than a typical rookie would. I would say where offense has clearly not been good, part of that is going to be a shooting regression. He's not shooting nearly as well as he was in preseason and in summer league, like you said. Some of that is going to be because of him adjusting to the pace of the game, and some of that's just going to be bad luck. It's a game of randomness. Like, you're going to have, no matter how good or no matter how bad you are, you're going to shoot sometimes in a way that's opposite of that. Like, a great shooter will have a shooting slump. A poor shooter will have a couple nights a year where they'll go like 4 for 5 from 3 or something.
Do you think
like
it's
that.
more of a shooting slump, or do you think it's more of him being a rookie, or is it kind of a combination of both?
Both. Yeah, I'd say that what has been very clear to me is that he's going to be someone, at least right now, who's an outside-in player. And one of the reasons that is because he's not really – I'd say he has a very good first step. I think he navigates pick and rolls really well. But I think he's someone to where once he gets past that initial layer of defense, I really don't think he's that good at finishing. And he's always driving left. Like, if you ever watch him, he's almost always trying to get to his left, and he's throwing his passes with his left hand off the dribble. And what he tries to do is, when he tries to get to the rim, he'll try to body his guy, but he's not particularly strong. He's not particularly explosive vertically, and he's not particularly crafty yet near the rim. So, what's happening is, really anything besides a gimme, he's not finishing at the around the rim. What I did like last night was that he actually, and again, he's going left every single time. And Schmidt was saying that actually one of the Golden State Warriors players said always left while he was driving. And that's certainly been true. So what he did was, I think it was in the fourth quarter or near the end of the third, he actually had a couple drives where he spun on them. And that's often what you can get around an overplay. So is it something to be excited about and say, no, it's solved now? No. He's still going to have some of the same issues. But I think he's really just, he's struggling to finish near the rim, and he's struggling to adjust to the pace of play because some of his passes have been we talked about him taking chances and stuff like that this summer, and how it probably won't work as a rookie. I would say that the way that he's passing, though, it's not even just the passes he's making. It's like he doesn't have enough mustard on him. He's throwing them really soft, and they're kind of slowly dribbling out to players when they're, certain types of passes, they're not reaching the players. I think he's adjusting. But yeah, it's been ugly, and I'm ashamed of falling victim to overhyping him, honestly.
Well, you know what? It's still really early, right? You can still look like a genius if he becomes,
that's my hope.
Even like a borderline all-star, anything like that. Even if he becomes a really, really strong NBA player, or NBA starter, I should say. You're still going to look good making that prediction there. And it's 4 games. It feels like a big hole. It feels like it's been so long since we've last talked, right? I can't believe the tone of the podcast, how different it is after that first podcast, after the first regular season game, episode 7, and now episode 8. I am feeling very pessimistic here, and I don't know. I hate to fall victim of being that typical fan who's woe is our team, the season's over and stuff like that. But I really am starting to believe that this first year is more of a developmental year with Zion. It's more of we're rebuilding more than people think. And I don't think we put enough emphasis on the fact that, 12 or 18 players on our roster were not Pelicans last year, and we're really struggling with that. Now, one thing that gives me solace there is that you mentioned in your schedule analysis, and I think episode 3 or 4 of this podcast, that we start out with a rough schedule. And so far, it has looked that way, right? I mean, the Mavericks are a borderline playoff team, just like we were supposed to be, and we could be still. Obviously, the defending champs, obviously the Rockets, and then the Warriors, who we don't really know how they're going to, they've been very inconsistent this season, but I think people, still respect the Warriors, obviously. So, yeah, it's rough in the Western Conference, and it's rough to start the season, and it's rough without Zion Williamson. But I'm afraid that if we drop a few more games, not a few, but I'm afraid that if this pace continues, by the time we do get Zion back, which could be, January 1st, 2020, that the season may be already lost. What do you?
I would say.
What do you think?
Well, I'm not in panic mode yet, and the reason I'm not is we're missing our two best players. So when you miss your two best players, almost any team is going to struggle. Again, so Golden State is missing just one of its best. I would say Clay is. It's hard for me to judge Clay versus Draymond because they're such different players. But I mean, I'd say that Clay is extremely impactful in their offense. Obviously, I think most NBA teams, you take away even just one of their top two guys, they're going to struggle for a while. Now, will they struggle as much as we struggle? Actually, it's funny though. I don't feel like we've struggled that much.
Yeah, no. 3 of the 4 games we were in them.
We were in them against very good teams.
Yeah.
So it feels really bad and it looks really bad. But I would say that we're not. The Golden State game was the only one where I said, "Whoa, this sucks."
Yeah.
That took took me back to the worst of the AD days, where it was just lifeless basketball. So I won't go crazy with it now. I think what is important though, I'm wondering how much of these injuries are really serious injuries that players could play through, or injuries where it's telling you what their direction is for this season.
Yes,
and
good point.
Yeah, because maybe Favors would be playing in another world where the team was really intentional about making the playoffs. Same with Drew. The amount of injuries that have happened, the surgery is obviously the surgery. Zion is going to be you don't do a surgery to be slightly conservative. You do a surgery because it's needed. So what I would say is that with Favors and Drew is maybe there are some indications with the way that they're handling it that this is a team where they aren't going to put any of their players at any risk whatsoever. And every NBA team, I really can't emphasize this enough, players throughout the year, they're almost all hurt. They're dealing with something, whatever that issue is.
It is a little odd that all of our star players here have knee. It's always the knee. For Drew, for Favors, and for Zion. All the knee.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why that is. I would say I know Drew worked out a lot with AD's guy, and Frank Jackson was out there too. I actually think Jaleel was out there as well with Drew as a strength guy. It's Mike something.
I mean, it's just a coincidence, I'm sure, but I'm just saying it's a little odd.
It is odd. Yeah, it's kind of strange. I mean, I guess it's not as strange given that Favors and Zion have already had knee issues, but
that makes it more concerning though, in terms of
probably
rest, right?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with anything that's a repeat offender. I mean, that's a chronic condition. You're going to be managing that at that point. So, yeah, I mean, it's not great. But I guess that's my point is it's maybe not as concerning. And again, this season, as much as I got really excited about the prospect of playoffs, I was obviously super excited about Zion and Alexander Walker and all that. I would say that this season is about developing those top guys. And I think you can look no further than we've talked about 25 minutes at this point, and we haven't mentioned Brandon Ingram, who has been absolutely excellent.
Yeah, he has
since game one. Well, and when I say since game one, I should say after game one. I actually didn't think he played that well in game one, and I really wasn't that impressed in the preseason. But that guy, man, ever since Drew went down, and maybe it's because he knows what he's going to be asked to do, but that guy has been really, really good. And a lot of the things that I was concerned about, primarily playmaking on offense and in terms of distributing to his teammates, he's showing a lot of promise in those areas.
What is his 3-point percentage? I mean, he is hitting threes like he never has before in his career. it's been pretty remarkable because I never really considered Brandon Ingram as a three-point shooter going into the season, even when he was scoring well as the guy sans LeBron late last year. His game was more kind of driving in and a little bit of iso ball and, making plays that way. He wasn't really like this, big three-point threat. Now, I mean, he's hitting. It seems like he's hitting 2 or 3 a game and on good efficiently. I might add. I've been pretty impressed with this three-point shooting.
Well, so he's not obviously gonna shoot 50% for the rest of the year, but I agree. I've also been impressed, and I think it's really the way that he's choosing his threes as well. Like I would say, for the most part, he's choosing good threes. He's taking a lot of corner threes right now. So when he's not on the ball, he's sitting in the corner a whole lot in terms of like actually where he's going to be positioned on the three-point line. I think he has the second most three-point attempts from the corner this season, behind PJ Tucker. But yeah, I would say it's the three-point shooting is looking promising. I think the distribution on the move, which is what my biggest concern was after watching him a little bit this preseason in that first game, I think that's getting better. I thought his defense against Porzingis with the Mavs was very impressive. I was
just about to say that. I mean, he held him to 2 for 7 in the second half of that game, I believe. And we had no answers for Porzingis in the first half when Ingram wasn't on him. I'm not sure. I don't recall who was on him, but it wasn't Ingram. And when Ingram started locking onto him in the second half, it was – I guess I shouldn't say it changed the game because the Mavericks still ended up winning. We couldn't stop Luka Doncic, who, by the way, I think is just so phenomenal. And I also think Luka is – side note here – I think Luka is very underrated. I think a lot of people don't really consider him already like a top 10 or top 8 talent in the NBA, but I'm already there, man. I don't care how young he is. I think that guy is unreal. Just watching him, I think he's an unbelievable talent, and I don't know. How do you feel about putting him in the top 10 right now?
He's close. If he's not there, he's really close. He's that.
I was
good.
just really impressed
it really is
with
just
him.
Experience.
I think a lot of me is bitter because I was targeting him like all off season for like my second round pick in our fantasy basketball league, and then like Eric Weller took him like 10 spots higher than his ADP should have indicated, and I was so upset. I don't even know who I ended up picking in the second round. I think it was Beal or something like that. And I've been like kind of game watching, or not game watching, but box score watching Luka Doncic, like imagining what if, and he's just been so incredible. But yeah, back to the point here. Ingram did a phenomenal job on Porzingis, and he's been impressive in other games defensively too. And he kind of Van Gundy kind of went into one of his little rants about how he's deceptively strong, when they were on national TV, and I thought that was pretty funny because they were talking about how skinny he looks and how good of a defender he's been lately.
Yeah, he was really great, and I do think that you were correct in saying that it did change the game for the Pelicans once Ingram went on Porzingis. I think mostly because the Pelicans had no answer for the pick and pop. One thing about Porzingis look, that guy, man, holy crap, that guy, the way he defended the rim was like, I guess no one's going to get a shot off. Like, no one's even going to get the ball to the rim. But once he was on offense, I thought he settled a lot. But I do think the pick and pop with him and Luka was really hard for us to stop. And I thought that Ingram's mobility in conjunction with his length, I gotta stop using that word so much. I use it all the time. But he's like a 7'4" wingspan, and so I think that moving someone like that, where he is mobile but also long like that, really helped our defense. Our defense certainly has a lot of issues, so anything we can do to shore it up is going to be appreciated. I've been really Ingram to me has been unequivocally our best player.
Yeah, and they asked him after the game. They said, I think one reporter went straight up and said, "Hey, do you know you held Kristaps to 2 for 7 in the second half of the game when you were guarding him 1-on-1?" And he said it should have been 0 for 7. That was his response. I was like, okay,
that's funny.
Jeez.
I didn't know. I'm wondering if they included too. Drew switched on to him towards the end of that game as well. So Drew had a couple possessions on him at the very end of that game. But I mean, regardless of it all, I thought Ingram did a fantastic job, and really, that's been the silver lining for me. Is this is about building up those top players that we received both in the trade and our rookies. Like, you want those guys, you want 2 or 3 of those guys to really pan out. And I think Ingram is right now. It looks like there's not really any competition.
Yeah,
Ingram
we have
is
something there.
definitely, besides Zion, who I hope he can stay healthy, and I would say besides Zion, there's no one else on this team long term that looks anything like Ingram at this moment.
I think it is about player development, of course, but I think that all the Peli-Fans out there would feel much better if Jrue Holiday just had one of those 30-point games, 8 assists, 3 steals, 1 or 2 blocks, like one of those crazy monster lines that everybody is not accustomed to because he doesn't do it every game, but everybody knows that Jrue Holiday is capable of. I think a lot of people, that would make a lot of Peli-Fans out there more optimistic about the team, because I think that there's some genuine concern that for whatever reason Jrue Holiday has kind of regressed a little.
I wouldn't go that far yet. I think it's still too early to get. People tend to be really harsh on Jrue. I would say that this is something that we've seen from Jrue multiple years. Like, Jrue is just someone that, for whatever reason, there are just times where he's not super aggressive, and aggressive Jrue is unstoppable.
Right.
And I don't think that we're done seeing that. I think he was acclimating to his teammates. I think, given what we're seeing from Ingram, I think it makes sense that he was acclimating, because you see what happens when Ingram is the guy. And I think at this point, it's possible that Ingram is the guy when Jrue gets back. If he's playing anything like this, I just don't. No one else puts pressure on the rim like Ingram in terms of our I guess, starting players. And I would say that he can see over the defense. He's extremely good scoring one-on-one. Extremely good is a stretch. I'm sorry. Let me take it down a notch. He's a very good one-on-one scorer. And I think he's learning to initiate the offense really well. I've been really happy with it.
Do you think that, I just thought of this a second ago, do you think that David Griffin's comments on Jrue Holiday about him being an MVP candidate, the goal of those comments obviously was to take less pressure off Zion Williamson. Do you think that it might have accidentally or ironically put more pressure on Jrue, and now fans are kind of a little upset that he's not living up to those lofty expectations?
I think they would have been upset no matter what, but I do think that it probably didn't help matters. Yeah. But I think what's nice about Jrue is, Jrue is the guy that can take that hit.
That's
not
true.
To go all Dark Knight on it, but he's a guy who can take those hits, and his reputation is already solidified. Jrue is a great player. That's not changing anytime soon, and I think he'll show that at some point.
I think one of the reasons that he's underrated too by most fans is even non-Pella fans is that his specialty is on defense, and I think that unless you're getting ridiculous steal numbers or block numbers, which doesn't really indicate, especially blocks, don't really indicate how great somebody is on defense. Games like that Portland series when he's shutting down Damian Lillard, people aren't seeing that in the box score, and they're not able to watch all these Pelicans games because we were really never on national TV until Zion came around. So I think basically because Jrue's expertise is on the defensive side of the ball, it makes people less appreciative of what he does for the team.
Yeah, and he's always someone who I think is going to not get quite the recognition that he deserves because of his nature.
That's true, too. He's very quiet.
People want to anoint, everything with analysis. I feel like one of the things that fans often tend to do is they tend to scapegoat, but they also do the opposite. Whatever player is the best on his team, they just assume that they're winning championships or whatever because of that one player. And in reality, it's just not that simple. It never is. No matter how good the player is, it's never as simple as just this is the only guy. Michael Jordan, it wasn't that way until he got Pippen. It wasn't that way with LeBron until he joined forces with D Wade. You can't. It's just not how it works. And I think to some degree, players who are not like that, players who are sort of, I don't want to call them. Jrue is not an alpha. I wouldn't call him that kind of person. He's not a domineering person in terms of his personality, and I've never looked at that as a bad thing. I think that's all fine. It's great to have an alpha, So like but you can't have 7 alphas. That just doesn't work.
Right.
So like you have to have a mix, and that's why you need both of them. So
I do think every
I
team
think,
needs
yeah,
at least one, though. I do.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Right, and that's not Drew is not really that guy, and through talking with some of the other Bourbon Street Shots guys, I think they were even saying that that Drew started to kind of say like to Griffin, like, or not to Griffin, but about all the hype that Griffin was putting out there. This is not. I'm not really a vocal leader by nature. Like that's not how I do it, and not as like an act of rebellion against Griffin, but just as a look. I'm not really built that way, and I love it because that was the opposite of what happened with Davis. Because Davis is the same way as Drew. But the only difference between Davis and Drew, besides the fact that Davis is more talented, is that Davis tries to be something that he's not. Like he's not. If you ask anybody in that Los Angeles Lakers locker room who the real leader was, and like all this talk about this be Davis's team, please, like it's LeBron's team, and it should be LeBron's team. And Davis is amazing in a secondary role. So like I don't like the what's the word for it? It just feels disingenuous to do that.
So one player, not to shift gears here though, but let's keep up the positivity here. We were talking about how Brandon Ingram has exceeded expectations. There's been another player that I think has exceeded a lot of expectations, especially mine, Josh Hart, right? I mean, he's been, I don't want to call him the real deal, but he has just been a nice, pleasant surprise. I think I used that same term in the last episode, but it's not just one game now. Like we're seeing multiple games. Yes, the first game was his best game, but he's still playing a big role for the Pelicans right now, and he's still doing a lot of the nitty gritty. He's rebounding well, and he's scoring, and he's playing a lot more minutes than we thought he was going to opening the season. So what are your thoughts on Josh Hart?
One of the first things, and I was looking at the stats earlier, and it stuck out to me, is that Josh Hart actually has the second most free throws on our team. Wow. And he's only down by 1 to Ingram, who has a lot more shots.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that Josh Hart has done very well, I think Josh Hart has balanced being aggressive without being over-aggressive. And I think he knows his role. Josh Hart's a good player, and I've been so happy with what he's done. But I think Josh Hart is the guy who works off of the other primary guys. Like he's never going to be, in my mind, a guy who is a number 1 or number 2 option on a team.
Right.
But with that said, he knows his role. He's aggressive within his role, feels it out, plays good defense. His help on the boards has been nice because our rebounding right now is absolutely atrocious. And that's one of the reasons that we're struggling so much defensively is because we can't close possessions. So like any help that we're getting from anybody outside of a big is just all gravy right now. And I think Hart has really, in my mind, I mean, he's one of our, at this moment, he is one of our best players. And I wouldn't have predicted it. I certainly didn't. And I think, I don't know if it continues once we get healthy bodies back. I think he'll be more like a 6th or 7th guy. But I've been very pleased with what I've seen so far, and yeah, I love the guy. He's a fan favorite too.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, he's always posting ever since the moment that he stepped foot in New Orleans. I'd argue even before he stepped foot in New Orleans, he has been all aboard the Pelicans train. I mean, and all aboard the New Orleans train. He's been. He tweeted the other day, "Go Tigers," and I was like, this guy didn't go to LSU. Like, what is he doing? But he's all about New Orleans, Louisiana sports. I mean, he loves it down here, which I think is just great for the locker room. It's great all around. He's a funny personality to follow on Twitter. So I suggest anyone listening to this podcast should go give him a follow for sure. Obviously, you're going to go give us a follow, definitely. But Michael, before we sign off, let's talk about that Nuggets game on Thursday. Drew Holiday is, I believe he's questionable. I believe he practiced today. And then we got Derrick Favors. It's already been revealed that he's going to be a game-time decision. If I had to guess, that probably means that he's less likely than not to play. I don't expect him to suit up if he's still having knee soreness. Obviously, we're still without Zion Williamson. What are your thoughts? Nuggets are a good team. It's another good opponent that we have to play. I know Nickeil Jokic has gotten off to a kind of a slow start. He's kind of notorious for that. But But still, the Nuggets are a great team. What are your expectations against Denver?
I don't know. I honestly, because if they play like they did in the first 3 games, I think they'll be somewhat competitive. That at least helps that we're at home because Denver's a really, really tough place to play.
That's true.
I would say that, I mean, they're just a better team. Like, clearly, like, even if we were at full strength, that is a better team than the one that we have. I think, one thing that we do have is we can get out and run, and that would probably tire out Jokic some. But, I mean, I think he's going to pick apart our defense. Like, if you talk about people who can make read and react passes, that guy's up there with anybody. And I think he's going to pick us apart. I really hope Favors plays. It would certainly be nice if Drew played as well. I think they're going to win that game, honestly. I kind of, but again, it's not like, even if they're going to beat us 80 or 85% of the time, like the way that the NBA schedule works is that you're not trying to, it's not every game turning out the way that it's supposed to. Like, you can beat a team who's better than you, and you can lose to a team that's much worse than you. So really what I'm looking for is in the next few games is I'm looking for us to win a couple, just like a couple, just to sort of like get some air. I mean, I think we can beat the Thunder. I think it's possible to beat the Nuggets. I don't think we should be favored, obviously, and I don't think Vegas will either. But if you're talking about the Nuggets, Thunder, and the Nets, I think we can get one of those games, even though 2 of them on the road. So I want at least one of those 2. 2 of the 3 would be fantastic and would be a little bit breath of fresh air after all the hoopla in the first few games. So
yeah, definitely. I'm a little less optimistic. I'm hoping we can get 1 game in that next 3 right there. But Michael, you're taking a pilgrimage in Spain, so you're going to be out the next 2 weeks. I'm going to have to do the podcast without you. Hopefully, I'll be able to bring on some guests to help me out here.
Yeah, I'll be praying for the Pelicans because then.
Well, why don't you kind of describe your journey for people who don't know?
Yeah, so I'll be going to I'm gonna be walking the Camino, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a true pilgrimage, not really knowing where I'm gonna be. Any given night, just staying in a hostel that seems to be the right time along the way, and losing some weight, I hope. And that's really it.
So you're gonna be hiking a lot, I guess.
Yeah, hiking a whole lot.
And so it's in Spain, right?
It is, yeah.
And how long are you gone for?
You trying to get my house robbed? No, I'm kidding. My roommates are going to be home, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'll be gone for like 7 or 8 days, so I'll miss this next podcast, and I guess it depends on how we time the one after that.
Gotcha. I don't know what the time difference is there, so I don't know if you're going to be, up at like 3. Actually, I don't know what your electricity situation is, honestly, on this pilgrimage. So, but if you find yourself in a situation where you can't even watch a Pelicans game, which I'm not even sure you will be able to, it might be at like 3 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, I will not. I can tell you this. Part of my pilgrimage is not going to be watching the Pelicans at an odd hour, so I'll be watching all those games well after the fact on DVR.
I gotcha. Yeah, you don't want to ruin your trip anyway. No, I'm just messing. I'm just messing. No, hopefully we can get some wins while you're gone, and maybe your pilgrimage is just what the Pelicans need to kind of pick things up here. All right, that's good. That's got to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to On the Fly, the official Pelicans podcast for hoopball.com, in-flight insight for all the sharpest Peli-Fans out there. Hey, as a reminder, if you like what you heard today, please subscribe to On the Fly and give us a great rating on iTunes or whatever your podcast provider is. You can follow us on Twitter at Mike_Pelicans, and I'm at Fantasy Law Guy. See you next week. I'll have a guest on. Should be good.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.